So now I want to come to the US-China relationship. So my first question would be, how significant was Trump's decision to label China a strategic adversary during his first term?
When you start these labels in the American system, it means something very, very specific. It means the entire community gets behind you. The target is put on that country, and everybody adheres to that target. See, this is the same reason why Trump is going to find it so difficult to de-escalate with Russia.
How will Trump deal with Taiwan? Because many have given a deadline of 2027 for China to invade Taiwan.
So first of all, we need to be very clear about this. Taiwan doesn't need to keep spending that much on defense in order to be very viable. Current Taiwanese defense capabilities can really bloody China's nose.
So now I want to come to the US-China relationship. So my first question would be, how significant was Trump's decision to label China a strategic adversary during his first term? Because we have seen that Biden has also almost continued the same policy. So how significant was Trump's decision to label China as a strategic adversary?
So in America, what happens is, it's not like Indian strategic partnership. We've announced strategic partnerships with everyone from, Liechtenstein and the Vatican to Russia on the other hand. Now, what Vatican can provide us except extra doses of holy water, I don't know. And what Liechtenstein can provide us other than extra money laundering facilities for corrupt industrialists, I don't know. But they are also strategic partnerships. Okay, we love these terms. The Chinese are also exactly like this. I've actually been to a conference which was one, sort of dick wagging competition between the Indian and the Chinese, who were listing out how their relationships with everyone had gone from um sustained dialogue to partnership to enhanced partnership to something else to something else to something else to strategic partnership. Okay. And I was like, why did I even, why? I mean, that was like 24 hours of my life I'm never getting back ever again. Um, Unfortunately, I was a moderator, so I couldn't even walk out quietly from the back, right? But here, what ends up happening is when you start these labels in the American system, it means something very, very specific. It means the entire community gets behind you. The target is put on that country, and everybody adheres to that target. See, this is the same reason why Trump is going to find it so difficult to de escalate with Russia, because Russia is already a strategic, it's much worse than a strategic adversary at the moment. But the moment that label has been given in the American system, Biden, for all the Democratic Party's corruption and being compromised to Chinese business interests, they can't change the way policy then gets reoriented within America. It directs intelligence resources, it directs military resources, it directs alliances and those alliances resources towards China or against China, really. And it will sustain. And in all of this, China is very smart because the more Russia acts as a provocateur, the Eurocentric uniparty plus Democrats will always want to focus more on Russia because that has always been they understand Russia better than they do China, you see. So they all want to play to their own academic strengths as opposed to China, which is sort of a very niche subject because it's a completely alien culture to them. Uh, they're completely alien to us as well, by the way. I think Europeans understand China more than we do, even though we actually share a border with them. So there's a lot of processes that it mandates on the US government which can't be changed.
Okay. So, Mr. Elbridge Colby, he mentioned that the US being committed indefinitely to Europe and the Middle East stretches them too thin when it comes to dealing with China. Can you explain this for a layman like me to understand? Like how is the US overstretched around the world, and let's say a war breaks out between US and China, what will the difficulties be that the US will face?
So see, it's you can't face down three enemies all at the same time. Hitler made the mistake of fighting a two-front war, something he warned about in his own book Mein Kampf. He said, we should have never gotten into two-front war, and then what does the idiot go and do? He starts a two-front war. He launches Operation Barbarossa. Today, you're looking at an American commitment to Israel. It extends as a US shield over Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Emirates against Iran. The Israeli-Iranian conflict risks escalating into a Saudi-Emirati conflict with Iran as well. So you have to prepare for that. That is an actual military deployment that America has to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Ukraine, which is a logistical deployment and an intelligence deployment you have to do, because you have to give them targeting coordinates. They're doing all the fighting, but you have to give them targeting. You've got to give them intel, which stresses out your intel community. Now, in all of this, how are you then going to focus on containing China? Because China needs huge amounts of money, much more than Israel requires, much more than Saudi Arabia requires in facing down Iran. And it certainly requires a much greater human and financial commitment than Ukraine does. So Ukraine is bleeding money. The Middle East is bleeding actual American military assets,
Mm-hmm.
having to protect all your allies. How much spare part you have left? And remember, the effective fighting force of any military is always 1/4
Mm-hmm.
of what is on paper. Why? Because troops need rest and relaxation. It's always 1/4 fighting, then the 2/4 go up, and the 1/4, because you can't sustain combat. The same troops can't be fighting all the time. They start slacking off, and the second reinforcements come. The third reinforcement, the third quarter, is then gearing up to replace the second quarter. The first quarter is on full wind down. The fourth quarter is on strategic reserve. You never throw in all your troops into a battle at any point of time, ever. Till you're guaranteed absolute victory, you don't. So, how do you maintain those cycles? You have what, 8, 9 aircraft carriers at the moment. One is deployed, two are deployed to the Middle East. One is deployed to Asia at the moment, technically to Japan. One is deployed to the American thing. That's already half the fleet, right? You're already overstretched. You then need to deploy. Technically, it should be two of them in China, which is under equipped at the moment. One in the Middle East, if at all. Technically, they should even be at the Middle East. The fifth fleet, which is based out of Bahrain, should be supporting the China fleet. So it should be three against China, technically. So you see, it all takes away resources from focusing on China. So he's completely right. It has always been unsustainable. And one of the things people had warned about with all this country building, nation building nonsense that the Americans went in for, Yugoslavia, Syria, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan. Afghanistan was kind of unavoidable, but um, the rest of it was you're stretching yourself too thin. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Imperial overextension is the classic end of empires.
Mm-hmm. So, given what you said, do you think Trump will commit to defending Taiwan? Because Biden did commit to defending Taiwan, given how there's America's strategic ambiguity when it comes to Taiwan, and given Taiwan's less defense spending and over dependence on America and China's red lines about Taiwan. So, how will Trump deal with Taiwan? Because many have given a deadline of 2027 for China to invade Taiwan.
So, first of all, we need to be very clear about this. Taiwan doesn't need to keep spending that much on defense in order to be very viable. They can really bloody China's nose. I'll honestly tell you this, even given the current Taiwanese defense capabilities, it will be almost next to impossible for China to. I mean, look at how much Russia has gotten bogged down in Ukraine. And Ukraine is a few generations behind Taiwan in war fighting and equipment and things like that. And this over a land border that is not defensible. It's all flat, plain land, which is the easiest land to invade. Now, Taiwan, you're looking at it, the Taiwan Straits are wider than the English Channel. So, if you're extrapolating sort of Hitler and the Battle of Britain, what Hitler couldn't do with Britain, which was just what 40 kilometers wide English Channel at its narrowest point, 40 odd kilometers wide. Um, how is China going to do with 100-kilometer odd or more wide Taiwan Straits? I don't know. They themselves don't know. They're going to do a lot of harass. They may try. Nothing prevents them from trying. But the Taiwanese themselves can make it very, very bloody for them. Uh, that is the point where all attention will crystallize on Asia. And understand this, if Taiwan starts off, Ukraine is toast. So much of American semiconductors depend on Taiwan. High value processors depend on Taiwan. Taiwan is infinitely more valuable to the Western trading system than Ukraine ever was or ever will be or ever can be. Right? Uh, in my mind, given how crucial Taiwan is with chips, it'll almost certainly merit a direct American military intervention.
Interesting. So, what about tensions in the South China Sea? Do you think China will up the ante in the South or lower the ante in the South China Sea? Because Philippines and
They
the US have a defense treaty.
look, they'll blow hot, blow cold. This is a game of stare me down. I think people have forgotten. I'm very old. I'm showing my age now. During the Cold War, I remember through the 80s growing up. Every week there was some kind of escalation, de-escalation between the Russians and the Americans. People seem to have forgotten all of that. Every week there would be some kind of provocation somewhere or the other. Some American ship fired on some Russian ship in the Black Sea. Some Russian plane overflew Alaska, or flew near close to San Francisco or whatever. Uh, it was constant. And this is the classic Cold War playbook where you're constantly kind of, uh, you know, kabaddi. Tu karke you keep testing the other before you actually go in, right? It's very rare when you actually go in. So it's this constant tu or kabaddi, whatever we used to say hu tu, but because it was easier than kabaddi, but that's the way it works. It's literally kabaddi. That's exactly what you're looking at.
Okay. So, my last question about this topic would be how will he deal with North Korea? Because now North Korea has a lot of leverage because of their deepening partnership with Russia. So, do you think they'll be compelled or even interested to start negotiations with Trump?
Good question. Look, he was always interested to deal with North Korea. North Korea is the feather in his cap that he avoided. He missed, possibly because of COVID. He might have gotten it had it not been for COVID. We don't know what's on the table. He may actually accept nuclear North Korea, because I can tell you honestly, I don't see any deal in which Korea agrees to give up its nuclear weapons. In which case, what is the accommodation you're looking at? I don't know. I honestly don't know the North Korean mindset well enough, and I don't buy American propaganda about North Korea that much, because remember, I've been to North Korea
Yeah.
and I've seen a very complex society out there which doesn't really fit a lot of what we're fed by the media. Uh, Maybe I've got parallax error. Maybe I've seen what they wanted me to see and whatever, for sure. Um, I don't think a deal on Korea is doable, but I think a lot of negotiations on Korea will happen. Deal, I don't think so.